Welcome to HD Rare Coins, your ultimate source for rare coins, fascinating history, and the thrill of discovery. From legendary pennies to hidden gems, we explore the world of numismatics one amazing coin at a time. It was just 10 cents. At least, that's how most people saw it. Small, light, easy to ignore. Something that slipped quietly between car seats, rolled under couches, clinked into tip jars, or vanished into forgotten change drawers. But not all dimes are created equal. And one day in 2004, inside the thundering heart of the Denver Mint, a coin was born that would carry a value no one could imagine, not 10 cents, but over $115,000. It came from a time when the world was shifting gears. The economy was recovering from the burst of the dot-com bubble. Digital banking was growing, but physical currency still ruled daily life. The coins still had meaning, still had movement. Across the nation, in gas stations and grocery stores, people reached for their change without a second thought. They didn't look at the dates. They didn't trace the ridges. But hidden in the plainness of routine was a dime unlike any other. A 2004 Roosevelt dime that didn't just pass hands, it would one day stop them. To understand the story of that little coin, you have to go back further, to 1946, when America said goodbye to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. His passing was felt like a thunderclap. He wasn't just a president, he was a symbol of resolve during the darkest hours of the Great Depression and World War II. And when the U.S. Mint sought to honor him, the dime was chosen, both for its size and for what it represented. Roosevelt's support of the March of Dimes made the choice poetic. And so, the Roosevelt dime was born, his profile etched in solemn strength on the obverse, and a torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, peace, and victory. Decades passed, and the design remained unchanged, a testament to enduring legacy. By the time 2004 arrived, millions of these dimes had been struck, circulated, and forgotten. But that year, in Denver, something happened. A few coins came out, different. It wasn't obvious at first. To most, they looked like all the others. But to the sharp-eyed, the trained, the curious, the anomalies began to whisper their secrets. It began with a coin dealer in Arizona, who was sorting through a fresh roll of 2004 dimes from a local bank. He was looking for high grades, nothing special. Just hunting for sharp strikes, clean surfaces, coins that might grade MS-67 or better. But one dime stopped him cold. Under the light, it glimmered oddly. The rims were unusually thick. The torch on the reverse had extra lines, almost like a shadow. The word liberty looked slightly doubled, but it wasn't the kind of doubling caused by bouncing dies. This was cleaner, more intentional. He grabbed a loop and leaned in. His hand started to shake that he sent the coin for grading. It came back MS-68, with a certified error, doubled die obverse and reverse. The graders noted early die state brilliance, nearly proof-like surfaces, and full strike definition. It was a unicorn. At first, it seemed like a one-off. But as news trickled out, more people started checking their change. Slowly, a pattern emerged. A handful of 2004 dimes, all sharing certain rare traits, doubled lettering, sharp full bands on the torch, unusually thick rims, and in some cases, subtle die cracks stretching across the reverse. They weren't errors in the traditional sense. These were mint anomalies, coins struck during a narrow window of production, with dies that had just begun to wear or had been misaligned during setup. The result was a small population of incredibly unique and visually striking coins. Collectors began to take notice. Online forums buzzed with rumors. Coin roll hunters emptied banks across the Midwest looking for more. Some came up empty. Others found coins with partial traits, light doubling, cleaner fields, but not quite the real thing. The full errors? Those were rare. Fewer than 20 certified examples would surface in the following years. And every time one did, its value climbed higher. A teenager in Colorado found one at a gas station. He had just bought a bottle of soda and a snack. The cashier handed him back a handful of change. The dime caught his attention not because it was shiny, but because of its thickness. It felt heavier, though it wasn't. The edge ridges felt deeper. When he compared it to other dimes later that night, he knew something was off. He showed it to a local collector. The man offered him $300 on the spot. The boy declined. He sent it in for grading. It returned MS-67 with full bands and clear doubling on both sides. Months later, it sold for $26,000 at auction. That single dime paid for his first year of college. As the hunt intensified, stories like that became legend. One woman in Georgia kept a dime in her jewelry box for years. She thought it was fake because the torch looked too detailed. It turned out to be one of the rare few struck with misaligned die pressure and a polished planchet, MS-68 full bands ***. It sold privately for $41,500. The stories mounted. So did the stakes, and then, the ultimate find. In 2023, a collector from Oregon submitted a 2004 D dime that had sat untouched in a sealed mint roll for nearly 20 years. It was flawless, mint frost on both sides, not a single contact mark, and doubling so crisp it almost looked engraved. PCGS graded it MS-69 FB with DDR/DO, a population of 1. When it hit the auction block, the bidding war was fierce. Phone bidders, live floor bidders, online proxy wars. When the hammer finally fell, the coin had sold for an astonishing $115,000. A dime. 10 cents. And yet, it had become one of the most valuable modern coins ever minted. Experts still debate how the anomaly occurred. Some say it was a test die, polished for proof-like quality and accidentally used on a business strike press. Others claim it was simply the result of timing, fresh dies, hot metal, perfect strike pressure, and a moment of mechanical imperfection that left a legacy of brilliance behind. Whatever the cause, the result was clear: the 2004 D dime had joined the ranks of modern coin royalty, and now, collectors everywhere want in. They comb through change. They search through rolls. They look under couch cushions, in coffee cans, in old piggy banks. The 2004 D dime has become more than just a coin, it's a legend. Because in a world that's increasingly digital, where physical money fades and plastic cards reign, the discovery of something tangible, something so small, yet so powerful, is a reminder that magic still exists in the most ordinary of places. The Denver Mint sat quietly that summer, humming with mechanical life. Inside, the press floors clattered with a rhythm as old as the building itself. It was a place of precision, of pressure, of endless metal rolling and striking. Operators worked shifts under fluorescent lights, their eyes trained for uniformity. But even the most flawless systems can make miracles without realizing it. That year, one of the dime striking machines had its dies swapped mid-shift, a standard procedure, routine and unnoticed. But one of the dies may have been imperfectly seated, tilted by fractions of a millimeter. The press didn't scream. No alarm sounded. The coins kept rolling out. But something subtle changed. That was how the earliest of the rare 2004 D dimes were born, through the tiniest deviation. A retired technician, interviewed years later, remembered a maintenance call log that June. One of the collar dies on a dime press had been producing slightly raised rims. At the time, they thought it was a minor seating issue, easily corrected. No one gave it a second thought. It wasn't until collectors began whispering about abnormally thick edges and sharper than usual rim detail that this mundane entry in a maintenance log began to matter. History had been written by a tool barely out of alignment. Meanwhile, collectors across the country were unknowingly hoarding treasure. In Portland, a coin roll hunter named Derek had a weekly ritual. He'd visit 3 different banks on Fridays, pick up dime rolls, and spend his weekend examining each one under LED lighting. He had searched for years: silver dimes, proofs, misalignments, double dies, but never anything worth more than a few $100s. Then came a roll of 2004 DS from a credit union downtown. The first 20 coins were standard. Then came one that made him freeze. The Roosevelt Ghost, he called it. The doubling was deep and clean, on "In God We Trust," on "Liberty," even faintly across Roosevelt's neck. But the reverse? The torch flamed with layers. He swore it looked alive. It graded MS-68 full bands DDR, and later sold $4.33,700. Each find brought a new theory. Some believe these coins were the result of a special test run, others that a partially proofed die was reused accidentally in a regular business strike session. One researcher published a theory suggesting the anomalies were the result of thermal cycling in the press room, extreme summer heat subtly affecting the timing of the die strikes. Another suggested a more romantic possibility, that a trainee, on their first mint floor assignment, had unknowingly calibrated the press with a slightly different stroke depth setting, producing a micro-run of ultra-sharp coins. Whatever the cause, the 2004 D-dimes became objects of obsession. A collector in Texas sold off his entire Morgan dollar collection to focus solely on acquiring as many high-grade 2004 D-dimes as he could find. He wasn't chasing volume. He was chasing perfection. Over 5 years, he purchased 62 different examples, each graded between MS-65 and MS-68, most with doubling or full bands. He displayed them in a velvet-lined tray, each coin in a slab, their labels aligned perfectly like soldiers in a parade. To him, these weren't just coins, they were messages from the mint, echoes of a moment when the ordinary transformed. In 2025, a new example surfaced, this time from a flea market in North Dakota. A man had been selling old coins from his father's estate. Buried in a pile of wheat pennies and bicentennial quarters was a single dime in a coin flip. Nothing special, written in pencil. But the buyer was curious. He bought the whole pile for $40. When he examined the dime at home, he saw it, full, flawless strike. Razor-sharp torch. Slight doubling on the date and liberty. He sent it in, not expecting much. But the results shocked everyone. PCGS gave it MS-69 full bands, die clash reverse. One of a kind. A relic of an almost impossible minting event. That coin sold privately to an international buyer for $112,000. By now, the legend of the 2004 D-dime had traveled beyond coin shows and forums. It began appearing in magazine articles. TikTok creators posted dramatic, "Did you know your dime could be worth this much?" videos that went viral. YouTube channels did deep dives, showing side-by-side comparisons of regular versus error strikes, explaining what to look for, where the die doubling showed up, how to see full bands, and why the Denver Mint of 2004 had quietly produced one of the most valuable modern dimes in existence. Even skeptics couldn't deny the trend. Auction houses adjusted their estimates upward. A coin that might have fetched $12,000 3 years ago now routinely saw hammer prices above $40,000 if the conditions were right. And the top-tier pieces? They were essentially priceless, because there were no equals to compare them against, and perhaps the strangest part. No one knows how many are still out there. They could be sitting in a coin jar on a kitchen counter. In the till of a forgotten gas station. In the couch cushions of a dusty motorhome. Anywhere a dime might hide, a small fortune might be sleeping. Because when it comes to the 2004 D Roosevelt dime, condition is everything. Most coins from that year circulated. They lived hard lives, scratched, tumbled, spent 1,000 times. But those few that escaped into pristine storage early, into mint rolls never opened, into hands that cared, those are the survivors. The tiny masterpieces. One final story surfaced recently, one that shook the collector world again. A janitor at a middle school in Arizona had been sweeping lockers during the summer break. He found a small Ziploc bag labeled "Lucky Change" tucked into the back of a forgotten locker. Inside, 2 wheat cents, a Sacagawea dollar, and one 2004 D dime. He nearly spent them at a vending machine that afternoon. But something told him to look them up. When he saw the stories about the dime online, he hesitated. He took it to a coin shop. The dealer smiled as soon as he saw it. Sent it in for grading. It came back MS-68 FB DDR/obverse machine doubling, a combination that hadn't been recorded before. That dime would eventually sell at auction for $105,000. And it came from the dusty back of a forgotten middle school locker. The sound was small, barely noticeable. A dime slipped through a soda machine's change return slot, landed with a metallic clink on a linoleum floor, and rolled in a lazy circle before settling beside a dusty sneaker. It was an ordinary day in 1969. Summer heat lingered across America, the Apollo 11 mission had just changed the course of human history, and the world was marching forward on rockets, radio waves, and restless ambition. In the background of it all, coins were changing hands, tokens of commerce, forgotten the moment they were spent. But one of those coins, struck in the quiet thunder of the U.S. Mint, would one day stop people in their tracks. A dime, born that year in metal and mystery, that would eventually be worth far more than its face value suggested. To the average American in 1969, a dime could buy a cold bottle of cola, a phone call, or 2 pieces of penny candy. No one imagined that a coin so small, so common, could one day command tens of thousands at auction. But the truth about coins is this: history lives in their details. And every now and then, one coin escapes the assembly line with just the right flaw, or perhaps just the right perfection, that it becomes a legend. The Roosevelt dime had already seen over 2 decades of circulation by 1969. First minted in 1946, it was created to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose legacy as a wartime president and architect of the New Deal had shaped a generation. The dime was a tribute, yes, but also a powerful symbol. Roosevelt had been a staunch supporter of the March of Dimes, the organization that fought against polio. That connection made the selection of the dime especially poetic. And so his image, noble and composed, appeared on the obverse, while the reverse featured a torch flanked by olive and oak branches, liberty, peace, and strength, all contained within a 10-cent piece. By 1969, millions of these coins had been struck and spent. The silver content had been phased out a few years prior, in 1965, replaced by a clad composition of copper and nickel. Many collectors at the time were more focused on holding onto the older silver dimes, unaware that some of the post-silver era coins, especially those struck in Denver, would become rarer and more valuable over time. The Denver Mint, known for its precision and volume, had struck over 145 million dimes in 1969. Most of them were perfect. Almost all of them were unremarkable. But a handful, just a fraction buried in circulation, bore tiny imperfections that would later make all the difference. It wasn't until decades later that the whispers began. Collectors began noticing unusual features on some 1969 dimes. The D mint mark was sometimes misaligned, or missing altogether. Some coins had unusually bold lettering, as if the dies had been engraved too deeply or were struck with too much pressure. On a few coins, under magnification, faint doubling could be seen on the words "Liberty" or "In God We Trust." And then came the discovery that would ignite a small frenzy: a single coin that showed clear, unmistakable doubling across the entire obverse, most notably on Roosevelt's profile and the inscriptions around it. It wasn't a trick of the eye. It was a double die obverse, and it was real. That coin, when verified and authenticated, shook the numismatic community. It was graded MS-67 and labeled as a major mint error. It had never seen circulation. Found in an unsearched roll of dimes kept in a basement safe since the early 70s, it became one of the most sought-after examples of a modern dime. At auction, it sold for $45,000, and in doing so, shone a spotlight on the quiet value of 1,969 dimes. Collectors began to dig deeper. Dealers scoured backstock. Coin roll hunters took to the banks, asking for box after box of dimes. Most of them came up empty. But the stories kept coming. A man in Florida discovered a near-perfect 1969 D dime in his father's old cigar box. A young girl in Ohio found one in a school vending machine. A Vietnam veteran unearthed one from a jar of change he hadn't touched since he returned home. These coins began appearing like relics from a forgotten era, each one with its own story, each one potentially worth thousands. Part of what made these coins so rare was the transition period in minting technology. The late 1960s were a time of modernization within the U.S. Mint. The machinery was becoming faster, the dies were harder, and yet, human oversight still played a vital role. When an error occurred, it wasn't always caught immediately. Some flawed dies, whether overused, overpolished, or misaligned, slipped into production unnoticed. And when they did, they left behind a trail of rare coins, often indistinguishable from regular strikes unless viewed under the right conditions by the right eyes. One particularly fascinating 1969 D specimen surfaced in 2021. It was listed online as part of a generic roll of uncirculated dimes from the late 60s and early 70s. The seller had no idea. The buyer, a hobbyist named Gene who had spent years searching for minor errors, noticed something odd about the Roosevelt profile under 5x magnification. The lips and nose appeared doubled. The motto looked split. He sent it in for grading. What came back shocked even the experts, MS-68, with strong doubling confirmed across multiple devices. The estimated value? $92,000. Gene's dime was immediately considered one of the finest known examples of the 1969 D double die. From that point on, the 1969 dime was no longer just a placeholder in change trays, it became a symbol of hidden potential. Stories poured in from across the country. An elderly woman in Kansas discovered one taped to the back of an old greeting card. A thrift store employee in Oregon found one in a coffee can of random coins left in a donation bin. Every few months, another would appear, some lightly circulated, some with pristine luster. But they all shared the same DNA, minting anomalies that transformed ordinary dimes into pieces of American history. And then, in late 2023, came the biggest discovery yet that a sealed, unopened mint set from 1969 was listed on an estate sale website. The photos were blurry. The seller had no background in coins. But something about the toning on the dime caught a bidder's attention. He placed a low bid, won the lot, and when it arrived, opened the pack with trembling hands. The dime looked untouched. The color was a soft champagne, the luster untouched by time. When it was graded, it shocked even the most seasoned numismatists. MS-69 full torch with DDO. Population, 1.it became the crown jewel of modern Roosevelt dimes. Later that year, the coin sold through a high-profile auction house. The bidding was fierce, online, in person, and over the phone. The coin's final price with buyer's premium? A staggering $117,500 for a dime. 10 cents, and yet, worth more than most people's cars, more than many homes, more than what Roosevelt himself could have imagined when he first graced the face of a coin. And that's the beauty of numismatics. Every coin tells a story, and some stories are written in imperfections. Small cracks in the surface of perfection that create something infinitely more valuable.